Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our second virtual town hall. I'm glad that you could join us again. Today we're going to be doing something a little different, answering some questions for sure. I'll provide some updates, and we have a pretty interesting panel of people who are working day to day to support our efforts in the COVID-19 response. Before we go into the program today, I'd like to again take a moment of silence for people we've lost since the last town hall. So please let's do that for a moment. Thank you very much. So what's the latest? A lot's been happening since I last spoke with you, especially outside of AHRC. One of the most important things that we need to be working on is ensuring we have the resources we need to do the terrific work that you perform every day for people we support, their families, and for each other. I'm going to break this out into three sectors: the city sector, the state, and the federal. At the city level, I think you probably know that the pandemic seems to be leveling. We passed the apex. Things are looking better, which is very promising. I think we all need to be alert to the fact that this could certainly come back in the fall, and it's not over yet. But that's a good pattern and trend for the city generally. We've been able to build some stronger connections to the city leadership, especially in the Department of Health. We've had some conversations with them about readiness if things get bad again, around PPE, around isolation and quarantine procedures. So we are happy about that. That's a building relationship. What I'll also add is Mayor de Blasio, as you may know, has set up a number of different sector councils to help reopen the city. I'm happy to say that I'm on one of the sector councils, the Public Health and Healthcare Council. We had our first meeting last night. There were 40 of us, mostly hospital executives and some other public health individuals from the city system. And I think it's good for us to have representation in the healthcare sector. I think one of the things that we struggled with early on was getting the attention of the healthcare system, getting the support we need. So I will certainly keep everyone updated on those meetings as they occur in the next couple of months. On the state level, the state's in a very bad position financially. I'm sure you've heard about it. The state's facing a $12 billion deficit, give or take $1 billion or $2. This is a real challenge for the state and in turn for us, because most of our money comes from the state through the Medicaid program and other grants and contracts. So right now, OPWDD has been certainly giving us guidance on the best way to respond to the pandemic. They've also, at least so far, been successful in ensuring our continued funding for the most part. Just a short while ago, there was another webinar outlining some of the funding models going forward. And while we're cautious about this, we do see, at least in the very near term, some funding that will continue. There are discussions of cuts, however. I want to talk about that briefly because, as I said earlier, our money comes from the federal government in many ways through Medicaid. And right now, there have been three federal initiatives, stimulus programs to provide money to respond to the pandemic. None of them have really provided meaningful aid to states and localities. The current bill that's out there right now, the HEROES Act, is a $3 trillion proposal. It's a lot of money. $2 billion of it is for essential employees, such as many people that are on the webinar right now, and $500 billion in state aid and $375 billion in aid to localities. This has not passed yet. It's very important that if you don't know about these particular bills, this particular bill, that we can help you learn about it. We need to advocate with Washington to be sure as we can that this money comes to New York State. It's really needed. We are an economic engine for the whole country. We don't have it yet, though. And if we don't get it, it's going to be very challenging. So we'll keep you updated on that. Within AHRC New York City, a few things. I think PPE is, again, we're in solid shape. I want to keep saying that every time. It's very important that we keep you protected. We keep people we support protected. And so far, I think we've been very successful at having the equipment we need to do that. There are a lot of questions after the last town hall about testing. And I'm very happy to say that through a lot of hard work and connections, we've worked up preferred relationships with Quest, which is a national lab, and CityMD, which I'm sure you've heard of. and they are working with Betsy Lynham, our Chief Program Officer, and Sharon Fong, our VP for HR, to enable access for people we support and for our staff. So more to come on that, but I'm very happy that we're able to really enable access to testing, both for the virus and also for antibodies. Also, we've been talking a lot, and I'm already getting some questions about reopening or transitioning our main office, especially, but other locations, into a more traditional occupancy. There's still a lot of work to do there. The good news is in the past week or two, there's been a lot of very detailed information coming out around how to best transition to a larger occupancy in buildings. We're going to be very careful and very slow about this. There are a lot of considerations around social distancing, around testing, around screening, around how our offices are set up, many other considerations here. I know you're going to be wondering about that, and we're going to provide more information on that in the very near future. So I want to go back again to discuss the essential work that you do. And I've been thanking you a lot. You've been getting thanked a lot. I hope that never wears thin. It should always sound the way it's intended. Amazing work that you're doing every day, and with a growing level of, I think, passion, compassion, and teamwork. I had the great fortune to go out to 6 group homes on Monday, and in Manhattan and in Queens, and it was a terrific experience. I got my temperature checked 6 times and only varied a little bit each time. I had to wash my hands way more than that, and the procedures are really tight. There's masks all over the place. You should be reassured that the teams across the city are practicing the things that we need to do to be sure we're safe, and we are minimizing any infection risk. I have to say, the staff I talked with, the people that we support that I was able to see, there's still a lot of good energy out there. It's been very difficult. We know it's difficult. We're working in close quarters in the group homes. By definition, it's hard to socially distance, but there's activities that are occurring. There's an energy, I think, that has really drawn people together. And very importantly, working across departments. There's a lot of ADS staff that I saw in the group homes supporting the work that we're doing. So I want to thank you all for that. And I think right now what I want to do is give you a round of applause. I can't hear you, but I'm going to give you a round of applause. So thank you for what you're doing. So we're really today going to focus on how we work even better together. And I think it's really critical that we get a sense, not a sense, but really more details on what's happening around the organization to respond to the pandemic, to plan going forward, and to support one another and to strengthen our teams across our many departments. So I'm really happy to say that we have some panelists here today. We have Craig Becker from residential, Denise Polanco from our educational department, and Aisha Torrance from our finance department. So what I want to do now is go over to Craig. Welcome, Craig. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be on this panel today.
Thanks so much for joining us. I love all those photos behind you, by the way. It looks terrific. A lot of nice color and action there. So
I've been here a long time.
You need a bigger bulletin board pretty soon, I think.
Right.
So I have a couple questions for you, Craig, and I want to start with, what are some of the most pressing challenges your team has faced in our COVID-19 response so far?
Well, I think it's fair to say that for us in residential, this has been primarily and foremost a medical crisis. And our goal is to both protect the people that live with us and our staff, and to prevent any sort of contamination or spread of the COVID virus. For us, that begins with our staff when they leave their front door. Many of our staff ride public transportation, buses, trains to get to their job sites. And in order to help protect them, we certainly have distributed hundreds and hundreds of what we call travel masks, which honestly have been generous donations from really across the country. I don't know if everyone saw the Stay in Touch yesterday, but there was a little story about this, about how people are really sitting at home, sewing masks and giving them out to folks like us who need them day to day. So we want folks to feel protected on their way to work. When someone gets to our door, as you mentioned, no one comes in without answering a series of questions about the obvious signs and symptoms of being a COVID positive or having a COVID-like symptoms. We also take people's temperature, as you said, and if any of those responses aren't positive, or if someone has a temperature of over 99, they don't come through that door until we checked with nursing management to make sure we feel it's safe for that person to continue at work. for many weeks now, as you said, we've been fully stocked with PPE, and I want to thank Pam Minkoff from Administrative Services and our own Faith Exis from Residential Facility Management. We have masks, gloves, gowns, booties, face shields, shower caps, whatever people want to wear to feel safe. And it certainly depends upon whatever particular home you're in and the level of illness in a home. We also are doing deep cleaning, desanitizing all of our homes on a weekly or regular basis. It's sort of this Uber sanitation with an ionizing agent, which is, I think, helped everyone feel more comfortable as well. Challenging for all of us, biggest challenges, I think, is the balance of everyone's personal life and their professional life. None of us can escape this 24 hours a day. So when our staff go home, they're facing it in a different situation than they do at work. And that's been, I think, a huge effort for all of us. Developing a routine really inside our houses, I think, has been our biggest daily challenge. And we could not have done that without the support of our sister departments. Adult Day Services, Camping and Recreation, ABS have all pitched in. As you know, we have staff from those departments working in every one of our houses or apartments. They're coming in at 9 o'clock, and from 9 to 2, the places are full of energy and excitement and activity. Most of these staff are young and creative and energetic, and it's terrific to have them in our houses and really keep things going during the day, because the usual day-to-day activities that our management staff have to do, like billing and documentation and reporting and all the things that go down the list every day, also have to continue. And the support of these additional staff in our homes really allows our staff to pull back just a little bit and get the day-to-day work done as well. Specifically, Camping and Rec has been great, offering us weekends at Camp Ann, day trips to Camp Ann, which would afford a respite for some of our individuals and the staff who could go along. We have a virtual library of activities from them, virtual discos and karaoke's, and that's meant a lot to have those plugged in. Because as you know, in residential, we're all about recreation and getting out in the community. And obviously that's come to a halt.
There's so much there that has been challenging your team, and some successes as well. I'm curious, what are some of the key lessons you've learned so far in the last 10 weeks or so?
Okay, I think first and foremost would be just really recognizing the resilience and the flexibility of our staff. Again, our day-to-day routines have been thrown out the windows, and we still need to get the job done. And I don't want to give this virus any credit in a positive way for anything, but I have to say that this experience has really done something that historically has been difficult for us at AHRC, which is to break down those barriers, those walls, and those silos between our departments. And that is happening on a daily basis. And I can only assume that moving forward, in the near term and the long term, this is probably how we're going to interact with each other to provide even a better quality of service for the people we support.
That's a great point. It's a cliche maybe to say together we're better, but I think this is demonstrating it in spades, and I really appreciate your raising that. So let's try to look into Craig's crystal ball and tell us what you think your team is going to be facing in the next few months.
Well, as I mentioned before, my crystal ball is a little foggy these days, but I think the routines we've established now seem like they're settling in. The individuals have gotten used to these new routines. We have these steady staff rolling in every day to assist us, and that I see as the path we're going to lead moving forward. The one other thing I would like to talk about in terms of the collaboration and cooperation between departments is between residential and family and clinical. One of the things that was clear to us from the very beginning is that our staff, as well as our individuals, were going to need a tremendous amount of emotional support as we slog through this pandemic. It was very crisis motivated at the beginning, and now as things have, I would like to say, calmed a little bit, or things are in place, people need to be able to express their emotions. This is a world of anxiety, depression, and sadness. And particularly in residential services, I mean, death is no stranger to us. It's part of life and part of what we provide to the people that we serve and who support them. And that's something that we know how to do well. We know how to grieve and mourn. We know how to celebrate and pay tribute to folks. But that mechanism is gone for us now. So people's emotions sort of needed to be set aside and kind of held inside. And as everyone would know, that's wears away very quietly inside all of us. We developed a program with Family and Clinical Services to help remedy that and move us forward through this long term. With their support, we have either a Article 16 psychologist or social worker assigned to each of our homes or apartment programs. They check in with them. They talk to managers, address the situation in a particular home, and decide together how those needs, those emotional needs, can best be met for not only the individuals, but for the staff and the management as they work through this day to day to day. I see this as a really exciting initiative, and that sort of that cooperative effort has just been amazing. So I thank all of our sister departments for that.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm glad you raised it. You talked about at least 3 departments that are working together seamlessly. And we got some questions in advance, I think, as the attendees know today. And some of them were actually related to what you already answered about how do we support people who are going through stress. Maybe they're depressed, they're dealing with a loss. And we have a decent system right now to respond to that. And if anybody watching the town hall right now doesn't know how to do it, please look at the resources that we've been sending you. Please contact your supervisor or HR. We definitely have a lot of ways we can support you and your team as we move through this. Craig, one more thing you mentioned a bunch of stuff that is successful, but tell us about one big success that you're really proud of.
Oh, well, I think the clinical program, it's going to be a huge and very positive initiative. And again, I'm just going to go back to our staff. It had never occurred to me how essential we all are. And we have made this happen, I believe, in a way that no one ever dreamed we could. And I got to say, I've never been prouder in my years at AHRC to be working alongside my colleagues in this time when everything is a challenge. And I think I want to end by saying this. If I can ask everyone tonight and every night at 7 o'clock is that 5 minutes of what I call clatitude, that gratitude and clatter that can scream out from cars and windows and balconies, and just sort of a joyous thank you to all the essential workers. And I think it means a lot to every one of us. So I'm going to ask all of my colleagues and everybody watching to make that part of their day every day to help us along.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Craig. We really appreciate you being here today. And I also want to thank, it's always dangerous to name names, but certainly Betsy Lynham's leadership and Michael Weinberg and the rest of the residential team. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. Kudos to you all. So we have an interesting dichotomy here. So Craig talked about what it's like to really be ground zero for the pandemic, people with IDD. And that's absolutely true. We're in New York City. We're a large organization. We've had some losses, and the responses that we've had in our residential program have been absolutely remarkable. But education is interesting, right? Because we educate close to 1,000 kids a year, but it's the exact opposite challenge. Our teachers can't be with the kids. They can't be in the classrooms. They're actually educating everybody virtually. So I'm really pleased that Denise Polanco is here to talk to us and give us some feedback on her team, what they're up to. And, first off, what are some of the pressing challenges you've seen in the educational system, Denise?
Well, first I want to start by saying thank you so much for allowing me to be part of your panel and to give, various viewpoints that we have in education. We're doing a lot of great things, and this is a wonderful platform to express what we're doing. In terms of challenges that we've had, we faced a few, but I want to say that the one that we faced that is the most challenging is remote learning. When we initially switched into remote learning world, all within a matter of 1 week, by the way, this was, of course, very challenging for our teams. But I am so proud of them for learning all the different platforms and working so hard with our families and with our children that have special needs. That continues to be a challenge that comes our way, but we're learning that together we can do anything. Anything is possible. And during this pandemic, the phrase that it takes a village really cannot be any more accurate. We will adapt to anything if we all do it together.
Yeah, it's a theme that we're hearing so much, and I'm glad to hear you're reinforcing it. Pretty much what schools do is they provide lessons to their students, and you do it in a structured way, in a way that helps build learning and gives our kids the ability to really be more included in school and society with their families and to learn new things. But there are lessons that you guys are learning as a team. And I'm curious, again, what are you learning over the past 10 weeks or so that has helped you respond?
That's an interesting question. I personally have learned that change is a new normal, and it is a constant, and it's something that our department has had to cope with. Also, I have learned that the staff, the students, and the families have shown tremendous resilience, commitment, and dedication, as evident in our participation rates, which are higher than I anticipated after 2 months of remote learning. In terms of the staff, we have staff that each and every one of them play a critical role in the instruction of every child. Watching my staff, from the teachers to the assistant teachers to the related service providers, and seeing them all become so creative and hardworking, it's really hit home that everyone is definitely playing a critical role in each of our children's lives. I've learned not to take anyone or anything for granted during these times.
So, Craig looked into his foggy crystal ball. I'd like you to look into yours. What do you see happening over the next number of months in education?
Well, I'm going to be realistic. My projection is that we're going to be working on maintenance. We have to maintain the high standards already that we have in place for our staff, for our students, for our families. It's working as hard as possible as we can to hold off regression as much as we can during these difficult times.
And finally, you mentioned some things that are truly successful. What really pops for you as a major success story so far?
Well, definitely seeing students, during week one, where my heart went out to some of them. I watched these amazing kids who displayed behaviors because this significant transition that they were forced to make, of seeing their teachers' face personally day in and day out, and now to have their teachers being seen through a screen is something that brought about difficult behaviors, and like I said, that were difficult to watch. However, 2 months later, when I see these same kids, I'm in shock to see how well they're doing, how they can sit for 30-minute sessions, how engaged they are. And if that's not the definition of success, I really don't know what is. Just one more thing, and in speaking to my colleagues from the preschool level all the way to the middle high school level, I feel that, well, they feel, and so do I, that parents are gaining a better understanding and appreciation for all the hard work that goes into teaching their children day in and day out. And the same goes for our teachers, looking into the homes of these children and the struggles that the parents have to face is also very difficult. But many parents have expressed that their connection with home and school has definitely improved. And this has allowed for a lot of generalization, which is something typically difficult for our students to be able to do. So I'm very proud of that as well.
That's great. What a great unforeseen benefit. So I'm glad you're able to tell us about that. So I want to thank you, and certainly thank the leadership of Betsy Lynham and Chris Petroli and Madeline Rivera and all the teachers' aides that are doing such a terrific job and a difficult job teaching from a distance and trying to maintain that connection for a while. This is not over yet. So thanks again for all that you do. Greatly appreciated. So we have a little bit of a technical glitch, and Aisha Torrance is not online right now with us. I'm going to pretend I'm Aisha, and I'm going to talk about finance a little bit, and give you a flavor for kind of what we're dealing with on the money side. There's no real opportunity to do what we do without the engine that is our revenue. And there's some incredible work that's been done in the background with Amy West and her team in doing several things that are really important. Number one is making sure we get paid. There's been so much effort in getting our claims in, being sure we're getting every penny that's owed to us, really accelerating those payments. And because of that, we're in a pretty solid financial position right now. Secondly, just like when you're at home, you manage your expenses. And there's been a lot of effort there to make sure we're paying our bills, but also to manage how we pay our bills, when we pay our bills in a way that makes sense for our day-to-day cash flow. And we've had some great successes there as well. It gets more complicated, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, about the longer-term situation around our rates. And the good news is, as I said earlier, that for now we have a bridge where we're getting paid for our services. Day services especially have a model called retainer days. The details don't matter so much, but we're getting more or less the money we were getting before the pandemic for AHRC New York City. That's going to get slightly more complicated in the months to come, and we're working very hard and advocating as hard as we possibly can to ensure a smooth flow of revenue into the organization as best we can. The reality is, and I'm being very transparent here, is that with a $12 billion deficit in New York State, as I said earlier, if there is not more money coming into the state, ideally through a federal stimulus plan for now, until we can get the state tax revenues back into into our system, which will take some time. It's not going to happen tomorrow. We're going to face some challenges. So there's been a lot of deep dive budgeting happening now, so we can best understand where we think we're going to be. It's hard to say because there's a lot of moving targets here, a lot of unknowns, but we're doing our very best to generate several different budgets to see how we can best plan for the short, mid, and long term. So that's a quick update on finance, and there's some questions coming our way there as well. So I'm now going to switch over to the Q&A session. We had originally, I think, expected to have somebody to read them to me, unlike last time where I was reading them myself, but I got to read them to myself anyway this time. So so bear with me. But we got a bunch of questions in both beforehand, and then also during the just before the town hall had started, the virtual town hall had started. So here's one that says, some personnel from day programs are now helping in the residences. How is that working, and will it continue throughout the summer? I think Craig already answered that question by and large. It's working very well. People are really collaborating together, which is terrific, and it's going to continue for a while. Certainly, and there are other questions around this. We don't expect to see day programs opening in the immediate future for sure. There are lots of legitimate considerations around social distancing, about the ability to have large numbers of people coming in on buses. That's not going to happen anytime real soon either. So we have a number of challenges before us, but the day programs occurring in the residences is certainly one of the best solutions we can have right now, and we're getting paid for those services, which is good news. We've got some questions about education. I think Denise answered some of them, but there are questions about when we open our schools, and that's going to be driven pretty much by the state education department and by New York City DOE. We can't open when we feel like it. We're going to open when we're told we can open, and when that happens, there will be specific guidelines. There already are guidelines pretty much out there about how to be in a space safely, how to ensure that people coming in are likely to be COVID-free, and all kinds of different steps we're going to need to take to ensure that the people are safe. I mean, there are some very specific questions here about will protective gear be provided? The answer is absolutely yes. We have ample amount of PPE, and certainly wherever it needs to be provided, we intend to have it, and make sure that our schools have it as well. One question that came up, which is an interesting one, is one of our schools, Howard Haber, it shares a building with other tenants, including medical offices. And how can we ensure that those settings are going to be safe when we open? It's a really good question. I think actually medical offices are probably actually very safe. I went to the doctors recently. They didn't let me in the building without a mask. They made me use hand sanitizer. They had all social distancing, seating and so on. But I think it's an important thing to be aware of, that we need to be vigilant about when we see that the appropriate social distancing and infection control measures are not happening, that we know about it. And that includes in our own buildings. You know, we are good at what we do. We are not perfect. So if there's something that you're seeing that doesn't seem right, you got to let us know as soon as you can, in a productive, constructive way, and we will fix it immediately. And the question here about camp, a lot of questions about camp, whether we're going to have camp open or not. There are some limitations, significant ones actually, about camp. We are going to be doing some modest programming at camp in a safe way. There's a question about if a staff member had recovered from COVID-19 and had antibodies present, you know, would the policy on quarantining change? Excuse me, if they moved around to other support groups. In that situation, nothing really changes. The person has to have all the equipment they would normally have. There are social distancing requirements wherever we can do it. And if someone is tested positive, then there are quarantining requirements, whether they have the antibodies or not, if the virus is positive. A couple of questions again in the educational section around going back to school, and one question was very specific to vaccines and what would happen. How do we respond to parents who say they're not going to send their child back to school until there's a vaccine? I think the best case, and if you're watching the news or reading the news or hearing the news, the vaccine is not going to happen this year. It's very unusual. If it did, that'd be terrific. It's unlikely to happen for at least another 12 months. And I think there's a very good possibility schools will open before there's a vaccine. So in those circumstances, we can't say for sure what's going to happen. Whether there'll be an opportunity to provide distance learning when schools are actually open, there might not be. They may need to homeschool. So that's kind of a question that's out there in the future a bit, but we're giving it the best answer that we can. Someone asked about opening for day habs again. And the reality is there's no plan right now to open day habs. There are a number of conversations going on right now within OPWDD and across our provider associations about how to most safely reopen. But the fact is that we cannot bring 100 people into a building anytime in the near future, maybe not at all until there's a vaccine. So this is one of the biggest challenges we have, and being very direct about it. We're spending a lot of time thinking and talking and planning about how do we preserve the supports that need to occur during the day, whether they're virtual, in person to some extent. There's also a major consideration about families who have their adult child at home. Lots and lots of complicated considerations here, and we don't yet have those things locked into place. I think that the good news is that from a support perspective, many of our ADS staff are working in residences. We're doing some virtual supports and so on. So I think we have at least a holding pattern right now that is decent. Those are all the questions I have. I'm sure there are more. So let me see if I can pull up on my phone since we're a little bit off the plan here. Bear with me a moment. Okay. Okay, here's a question that's very direct, and I appreciate it. And it says, what actions is the agency contemplating to address the permanent and ongoing financial losses that will not be covered by any of the current funding streams and grants? Will there be permanent cuts in spending that all departments will be required to do in the upcoming year until the agency recovers from the financial loss? So the first thing is we don't know if there are any real permanent financial losses. There may be, but we don't know that for sure. We know that there are short-term financial challenges that we're facing. As I mentioned earlier, we're doing our very best to anticipate those, to plan for them, to use our cash wisely, and to also certainly seek other funding options through foundations, through FEMA, through other government support programs. And that's, again, why it's so important that this bill that's in Congress right now make it to the floor of the Senate and become law. A related question, I think down here, hang on a second. Will employees be allowed to have the option to work remotely when the New York pause is slowly being lifted in different phases and after the pandemic is over? Well, the answer is maybe, probably yes in some cases, maybe in others. And we're looking at that as well. We've learned a lot of stuff during this pandemic. And as horrific as it is, if we don't learn new things in this process and make the organization better and make us stronger, then shame on us. And I think what we've learned clearly is that the ability to work remotely in effective ways can definitely happen for a lot of positions, either full-time or part-time. So we're going to look at that. We're going to be flexible on that. Certainly safety is first and foremost, but there's no reason why a number of our positions can't be virtual most of the time or some of the time. And we need to have the connectivity to do that. And our IT team has done a really great job so far in helping us get there. It's a critical transition point. And this is not just us. I think the entire business community is looking at this question. And we're going to do our best to have a sensible way of working that through. What kind of changes will there be in the workplace when employees are able to physically return to work safely, including 83 Maiden Lane and other facilities? I think I answered that to a great extent. At Maiden Lane, particularly where we have 400 plus people when we're fully occupied there, is something we're looking at very carefully. We have other tenants in the building as well. They're not in there now, but they will be at some point probably. The good news is that we have a building manager for Maiden Lane, Helmsley Spear, which is a very large, really national property management company, and they're going to have the best practices, the guidelines, the criteria to ensure that our space is as safe as possible when entering Maiden Lane. I want us to be sure that we are doing the best we can to keep people safe. That's obvious to say that. We need to understand what other buildings are doing as well. We don't want to be the outlier, and Helmsley Spear can help us with that. But there's also a lot of material we're looking at right now to help us guide the gradual transitioning to more people at Maiden Lane, and it will be gradual. Let's see. Okay, here's one. That's, again, a very direct question. I appreciate it. Outside of DSPs and job coaches who have secure positions with AHRC because they are needed in the field, is there a possibility of layoffs in other departments due to funding cuts? Well, the answer is yes, there is. But that doesn't mean that they're coming right now or coming at all. We need to look carefully at our budgets, and we need to look carefully and better understand what income is coming our way. Right now, the program income is relatively stable. That could change, and it probably will change if we don't get the federal money I was talking about. So I want to be very direct and honest about this. There is a chance that we will have to lose some positions. That's not scheduled yet. It's not something that we are planning in the immediate future. But I wouldn't be honest if I said to you that if we get major cuts, the governor's proposed a 2% cut even before the pandemic, and we're hearing the possibility of very significant cuts if we don't get the federal funding. That's a possibility. My goal and my commitment to you is that as we progress our understanding of what's happening budget-wise, that we have honest discussions and productive discussions about what it is that we can do and cannot do. That's the best honest answer I can give you right now. Let's see. Many of these are overlapping, so I don't want to read the same question over and over again. I think I covered the questions. Oh, there is one question here, which again is a good one. It's a very technical one. What will happen to unused personal days that expire on June 30th? And then carried over vacation days that expire on September 30th. Will there be an extension? The answer is I don't know yet. Our policy has been that you don't carry those over. These are extraordinary circumstances. And what I will commit to you is that we're going to look at that, look at our policies, look at our ability to stretch those policies. But right now our policies are in place. So we're going to consider it. It's a good question. And I think it's reasonable given some of the uncertainty that we have been having here. Double checking to see if there's anything else that I haven't caught. Yeah, there's one here again in education. It's a long question, but I'll read it. Teachers and students have been working since February with no break in between, and thank you for that. There's a general feeling of malaise, anxiety, stress, and exhaustion, which is understandable. I'm saying that. With no significant breaks in the near future, in addition to mandatory summer school, there is a great danger of burnout or worse, high turnover rates. What can be done to help teachers through these mentally and physically exhausting times? It's a really good question. I'm glad that whoever sent it to us is comfortable asking it in a direct way. So Craig covered some of that, actually a lot of it. I think Craig talked in great detail about what we're trying to do virtually, we're doing virtually to support staff and parents and people that we support through virtual means, and please take advantage of that. I'm not sure to what extent the education staff have taken advantage of that, but please make sure we do it, number one. Number two is that we need to understand in a fast-moving environment like this, what the impact is of moving some of these time off segments around. So we had the spring break that didn't happen, but those were 6 or 7 days. What can we do? Is there a way we can work through reassigning those days to people and offering them to them? We have to see. We have to work with Chris and the education team and our regulators to see how we can do that. But the big answer to this is we need to do whatever we can to be sure that you get the time off that's due to you, and we will advocate for that. And that in the meantime, to the extent that you have certain time available to you, you should use it. And then thirdly, to reinforce the fact that it's very important that you take care of yourself. It's very important that you let your supervisor know if you're under undue stress, and we can do whatever we can to help through our existing systems within the AHRC, and certainly through our health plans and employee assistance programs. So I think those are all the questions, unless something has come through recently. I think we covered everything. I'm getting a no. I can see somebody saying a no. So I'm going to thank everybody. Thank our panelists for doing a great job. I want to thank you all for joining me again today. We're going to set up another one of these in the near future. I think the panelists approach something we're going to consider again, so you get to hear from more of your colleagues in different parts of the organization, and to reinforce not only the excellent work being done, but an honest discussion about what we're being challenged by. This is a very challenging time for us, a very difficult time, a stressful time. Let's hang together. Let's stick together. Let's celebrate our successes, but also let's be sure that we support each other. We don't want to sugarcoat this. It's a terrible, terrible, challenging time for our city and for our organization. But we already are seeing, I think, some of the very small silver lining in working together in these urgent circumstances. And we want to learn from that and then make sure that we're able to move forward in ways that make us even stronger. So thank you very much. Thanks for all you do. And we'll be back to you shortly. If you have more questions, send them to us. We'll try to answer them as best we can. And there'll be a recording, I think, of this available to you shortly. Thanks again. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.